Welcome again to our Bible study on the book of Judges. This is the 13th session, and I will say that if you've missed 11 and 12, or you're just coming in first or whatever, I would suggest going back to at least session 11 so that you can get the entire Gideon saga, because today we're looking at chapter 8, which is the ending of the Gideon story, and chapter 6 and 7 give us a lot of information so that we can better understand chapter 8. And so please, if you have not done 11 and 12, jump back and start with 11, 12, and then 13. I did promise a couple things at the end of the last one because I was home without my maps and pictures at the end of for chapter 7, that I promised that I would show some now. And so I've got them here finally at home. Just so you know, Mount Tabor is this little mountain that you see behind this ridge of mountains. That is where the story of Deborah took place, around Mount Tabor. But Hill of Moreh and Mount Gilboa, this is the Hill of Moreh, and Gilboa starts here and it's a ridge. It kind of keeps on going. So this gives you a hint. This picture was taken from the top of Mount Carmel. So that gives you also, if you know the Elijah story, this is where it happened, and Israelites were all here watching it. But for the story of Gideon, the Midianite army and Amalekites and all that were in this valley right here. This is where they were. On a map, we'll see that the Israelites with Gideon came from these areas. This is Mount Moreh, and the Ephraim at the end of chapter 7, when he called Ephraim to come and close in on the river. They closed off much of it. Sorry, I'm still got that cold that I had in last time. They did manage most of it, but we will see that there are a couple people who got past them. And we're going to continue the story in chapter 8. But before that, even, there was something that I completely forgot to point out in chapter 7 at the time of the initial moment of the battle. I thought of it after I had said it, finished taping in English. So if you actually watch the Spanish one, I remembered to mention it in the Spanish one at the right time. But if you can remember back to when they had, the 300 had encircled the Midianite camp, and they had the Bible tells us they had a trumpet in their right hand, my right hand, and a lit torch in their left hand. And then they shouted out, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." And in chapter 7, verse 20, this is 20 and 21, 21 says, "While each man held his position around the camp, all the Midianites ran, crying out as they fled." And later we see that they fought each other down there. But in the meantime, you have 300 guys blowing trumpets, holding them with their right hand, holding torches with their left hand, yelling, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." What hand are they going to use for the sword? And it also says, while each man held his position. He did not go in there. The 300 were just surrounding. They weren't actually fighting at that moment. They were literally, God was doing the fighting for them. They're yelling about swords, but they don't have a hand to fight with. It's not until the enemy army they're killing each other in confusion, and then some of them finally get away to escape. And they go running off to escape. And that's when Gideon and his 300 go after them and start calling from the other tribes to come and join them to capture all of these people. And then at that time, then they could pull out their swords. But at the actual initial winning of the battle was done totally by God, because the men had their hands full doing what God had told them to do, which was blow horns and hold torches and hold their ground. So it's very interesting, and I wanted to point that out. It's like there are some times where God tells us to do something, and it's like, okay, when do I stop? It's like, when do I stop? It's like, when do I get into the battle? And it's like, no, God is taking care of this. He just wants you to be a witness of the incredible wonder of Him winning and doing what He has promised for you. A little warm here, so I'm going to turn my little fan on. Hope it doesn't make any noise for you. Okay, so now we're at chapter 8. Okay, let's look at chapter 8, and we're going to read the first 3 verses to begin with. Judges chapter 8, 1 through 3. Now, the Ephraimites asked Gideon, "Why have you treated us like this? Why didn't you call us when you went to fight Midian?" And they criticized him sharply. But he answered them, "What have I accomplished compared to you? Aren't the gleanings of Ephraim's grapes better than the full grape harvest of Abiezer? God gave Oreb and Zeb, the Midianite leaders, into your hands. What was I able to do compared to you?" And at this, their resentment against him subsided. Remember, Ephraim was not called at the initial call-up of soldiers, the initial 32,000 that showed up at the first call-up. They didn't invite the Ephraimites. But when it came to the cleanup and the guarding, catching the fleeing army, then they were called up. And so they're here like, wait, you wait until the battle was over first. But it's like, wait a minute, you're the ones who got 2 of the, the princes, the leaders of the Midianites. It's like, I'm running after a bunch of regular soldiers. You're the ones who captured the important guys, Oreb and Zeb. But then it continues. So the Ephraimites are like, oh yeah, okay, I guess, okay, we did our part. We did good. So verse 4 through 9. Gideon is in hot pursuit. Gideon and his 300 men, exhausted yet keeping up the pursuit, came to the Jordan and crossed it. He said to the men of Succoth, "Give my troops some bread. They are worn out, and I am still pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian." But the officials of Succoth said, "Do you already have the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna in your possession? Why should we give bread to your troops?" Then Gideon replied, "Just for that, when the Lord has given Zebah and Zalmunna into my hands, I will tear your flesh with desert thorns and briars." From there he went up to Peniel and made the same request of them. But they answered as the men of Succoth had. So he said to the men of Peniel, "When I return in triumph, I will tear down this tower." Apparently Peniel has a big tower. Okay, so they've crossed the Jordan. They are still in Israeli land. And I want you to see, it's on the edge of between Gad and Manasseh, but it's really mostly Gad, let's say, because they're on this side, right on the river. I want to show you. The red is the people, the Midianites trying to get away, the enemy army, and so they go from Moreh in that area, and they're running, and here Gideon is running after these 2 kings of Midian, Zebah and Zalmunna. They apparently like Z's in Midian, because we have Zeb, Zebah, and Zalmunna. Okay, so he gets to Succoth and asks, and they say no. He gets to Peniel, he asks, they say no. And so they continue after these 2 kings. But he basically tells those 2 cities, it's like Israelite cities who are not backing them up. He basically tells them, it's like, I'm going to torture you. I am going to tear down this tower. I am going to punish you with desert thorns and briars. And if you've ever just touched your finger on a thorn, and and the blood that comes and everything is like, just imagine, what he is saying to them. Okay, so all they asked for was some bread. It's like, got some bread. We're hungry. We're tired. We're worn out. We've been running after these guys from here all the way over here. It's like, just give us some bread. It's like, no. Okay. It's like, why should we side with you? You don't have, you might be the losing side. Yeah. So anyway, okay. Go on ahead. Verses 18 through 21. Then he asked Ziba, oh no, sorry. No, he still has to go after them. Sorry. Oh my goodness. I am so far ahead. Okay, verse 10. I'm following these little yellow lines that I've drawn in my Bible to where to stop, and I just skipped a couple. Yeah. Okay. Verse 10. Now Ziba and Zalmunna were in Karkor with a force of about 15,000 men, all that were left of the armies of the eastern peoples. 120,000 swordsmen had fallen. So apparently, if we do our math, originally there were 100, let's see, let me look at this again. 120 plus 15, so 135,000 men originally. So Gideon with 300 men against 135,000 men. And they're down to just 15,000 men, which is less than half of what Gideon originally had at 32,000. Okay. So, 120,000 swordsmen had fallen. Verse 11. Gideon went up by the route of the nomads east of Toba and Hogbeha and fell upon the unsuspecting army. Still 300 against 15,000. Ziba and Zalmunna, the two kings of Midian, fled, but he pursued them and captured them, routing their entire army. 300 against 15,000. And they routed them. They won. They beat them. They captured the two kings. I want to continue to show you this because one of the other names, it's like, okay, Succoth won't give them bread, Peniel won't get them. So he just keeps on following and keeps on following and keeps on following and keeps on following him. And this is another of the cities that's mentioned. They're running there. And then he finally catches them someplace in that area. Actually, let me see. Okay, yeah. Noba. There's no Noba on my map. That was what I was looking for. I was wondering if it said Karkor, but no, it's Noba. Okay, so they've captured the two kings. So we're going to continue. Verse 13. Gideon, son of Joash, then returned from the battle by the pass of Heres. He caught a young man of Succoth and questioned him. And the young man wrote down for him the names of the 77 officials of Succoth, the elders of the town. Then Gideon came and said to the men of Succoth, "Here are Ziba and Zalmunna, about whom you taunted me by saying, 'Do you already have the hands of Ziba and Zalmunna in your possession? Why should we give you bread to your exhausted men?' Gideon took the elders of the town and taught the men of Succoth a lesson by punishing them with desert thorns and briars. He also pulled down the tower of Peniel and killed the men of the town." Okay. This chapter starts out pretty good, and then these two cities, act irresponsibly. But now that Gideon has caught the last of the kings here, and he goes back and he kind of is a little hot-headed. I mean, okay, you hurt the guys from Succoth, 77 elders, the important people of the town, the city. You punish them with desert thorns and briars. You've pulled down the tower of Peniel. It's kind of like temper tantrum thing. It's like, well, you didn't give us bread, so I'm going to. And now they were wrong. But again, these are Israelites. Gideon shouldn't need to be doing this to other fellow. He could have just shown the guys and said, see, I told you. And it's like, you're the last people I'm going to expect help from or to help. You know, he could be like that. But to actually torture one group, and then in Peniel, he kills the men of the town. Again, Israelites. This is not what a good judge, what God is looking for in his judges. We already start seeing something has changed in Gideon. It's almost like he's taking things personally rather than thinking of God. And it continues. We're going to continue chapter 8, verse 18. Then he asked Zebah and Zalmunna, what kind of men did you kill at Tabor? Men like you, they answered, each one with a bearing of a prince. And Gideon replied, those were my brothers, the sons of my own mother. As surely as the Lord lives, if you had spared their lives, I would not kill you. Turning to Jether, his oldest son, he said, kill them. But Jether did not draw his sword, because he was only a boy, and he was afraid. Zebah and Zalmunna said, come, do it yourself. As is the man, so is his strength. Taunting him. So Gideon stepped forward and killed them, and took the ornaments off their camels' necks. Okay. It's, first of all, it's kind of like this retaliation type mindset. And then to ask your child son, he might be your oldest son, but he's still a child, a boy, to kill these two men. It's like, I don't know about your parenting. I have no children. I am, but I think this is a no-no when it comes to good parenting, telling your son, who's probably about 10 years old, 12 years old, kill these two guys. Huh? No. And then, of course, Zebah and Zalmunna make fun of Gideon, and so Gideon's response is to kill them, because what they say, as is the man, so is his strength. It's basically saying, oh, you're just too weak to kill us. You're just too shy. You're just too scared to kill us. You're just like this little boy here. And so rather than doing it for God's justice, he does it to make himself look better. Okay, another negative. Some more negatives. They're starting to pile up. But then, okay, things change a little. And verse 22, the Israelites said to Gideon, rule over us, you, your son, and your grandson, because you have saved us out of the hand of Midian. But Gideon told them, I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. And he said, I do have one request, that each of you give me an earring from your share of the plunder. It was the custom of the Ishmaelites, which were the Midianites, and Midianites definitely were Ishmaelites, to wear gold earrings. Ishmaelites, if you don't remember or don't know, Abraham, way back at the beginning, Abraham had, God had promised him a son. He was old, his wife was old, and so she gave Abraham her maid to be his concubine, and she got pregnant and had a son. His name was Ishmael. And so it's kind of like, okay, well, we've done it. And God's going, that's not what I said. That's not what I promised. I promised you guys a son. And so later, Sarah, when she was extremely old, people nowadays don't even live to be as old as she was, most people, she gave birth to Isaac. And so Ishmael was sent away, and his mother Hagar, and Isaac was raised as that promised son. Well, Ishmael ends up being the forefather of many nations. And today, if you think of Arabs are basically descendants of Ishmael. And so the war between Israel and Arabs has been ever since Isaac and Ishmael. Anyway, so, but they apparently had a custom of wearing gold earrings. And so Gideon is saying, we don't want to be, I don't want to be king. I don't want my son to be king. But could you give me one earring out of everything that you plundered? Because I know everyone's got some earrings, because we have several thousand on our side, and they had 135,000. So he's got like, there's got to be at least 135,000 of these earrings out there. So anyway, so they, in verse 25, we can see, and you're here going, okay, well, I don't know why he expects them to give him part of their plunder, but okay, it's like, it's a thing. It's the Old Testament, weird times. Verse 25. They answer, we'll be glad to give them. So they spread out a garment, and each man threw a ring from his plunder onto it. The weight of the gold rings he asked for came to 1,700 shekels, which is 43 pounds of gold. 43 pounds. Not counting the ornaments, the pendants, and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, or the chains that were on their camels' necks. Gideon made the gold into an ephod, which he placed in Ophrah, his town. All Israel prostituted themselves by worshiping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. We'll stop there. So he asks for this gold. In one sentence, he says, the Lord will rule over you. In the next sentence, I do have one request, an earring. Okay, and then he takes this gold and he makes an ephod. If you remember from earlier studies, earlier chapters where we learned about, people were making ephods all over the place, apparently, when people were doing whatever they felt like doing because God was not their king. The ephod is supposed to be what the priests wear when they are at the temple working at the temple, or at least the high priest wears an ephod, because he's the one who goes into the presence of God in the Holy of Holies. Okay, so he makes an ephod, and on it would have 12 stones representing the 12 tribes of Israel, 12 semi-precious stones. So he makes this ephod, he places it in his hometown, Ophrah, and Israel starts worshiping it instead of the real ones at the tabernacle, and worshiping God at the tabernacle, where the real ephod, the original ephod, the one made in the time of Moses, where God's presence actually is, the Ark of the Covenant and all of that. It's like, no, they're worshiping this ephod in Ophrah. Okay, so wrong. Gideon says, I will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. But in the very next sentence, because he obviously has already been thinking this, I want to make an ephod to take home, to have at home, so we can worship God, God through the ephod. It becomes a graven image. It's not the original. It's not God. So we continue. Thus Midian was subdued before the Israelites and did not raise its head again. During Gideon's lifetime, the land enjoyed peace 40 years. It's a favorite number, 40 years. Jerubbaal, son of Joash, or it's another name for Gideon, Jerubbaal, went back home to live. He had 70 sons of his own, for he had many wives. His concubine, who lived in Shechem, also bore him a son, whom he named Abimelech. Gideon, son of Joash, died at a good old age, and was buried in the tomb of his father Joash in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. It's up there. He has 70 sons by wives. So he's got a bunch of wives, 70 legal sons, and then he also has his concubine in Shechem, who happens to have a son who ends up being called Abimelech. Why do we have no names for the 70 sons, at least not up to now? They're not named here. They might be in coming chapters, but up to this point, no. But we know the name of Abimelech, the son of his concubine. Why? First of all, again, Gideon started out a scared Israelite hiding in a wine press threshing wheat. Through God's empowerment and God's assurance, he became a valiant warrior. And then I think he basically got full of himself by the end of it, and becomes much more, it falls into that category of, absolute power corrupts absolutely. He becomes corrupted by world and not by God. He's not filled with God, and he starts living a human, an earthly life rather than a godly life. And it's something that we need to be careful, because as Christians, we are called to be Christ-like. And we can start off being full and joy-filled with God. But through the time, through the years, we can become a little more worldly and forget that fullness of God, and fall into, well, it's important. This is important to the world. This is important, rather than what's important to God. We need to be careful to not fall into, well, this is what it looks fine in the world. It's what we do. This is how we live life. This is what we should be living like. This is what it means to be a good human. Worshipping ephods at the wrong place, the wrong time. Gideon begins to show us an example of a damaged judge. Up until this point, all the way through Deborah, and then the others, Othniel, and all the other previous ones, they stayed true to God the whole time. But despite God had promised peace, and they had 40 years of peace. But verse 33, no sooner had Gideon died than the Israelites again prostituted themselves to the Baals. Baals was kind of like the generic, it literally translates to gods, gods. Like we use small g, gods, and capital G for God. Well, if it says plural, Baals, they're just talking about all these different gods that they have around. They set up Baal Berith as their god, and did not remember the Lord their God, who had rescued them from the hands of all their enemies on every side. They also failed to show kindness to the family of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, for all the good things he had done for them. He had been good to them. He had helped them become free. He had followed God's advice, and apparently they went back to worshiping the Baals, the false gods, not even pretending to worship God with the ephod. At least they were pretending. They thought it was their idea of how it went. But then no sooner had Gideon died. It was like instant. It wasn't 5 years later. It was like as soon as he died, is like, okay, he's not around anymore. We'll do what we want. And also they did not. They failed to show kindness to the family, And I think this might be why the next chapter happens. In my Bible, I'll give you a hint. My Bible, the title for that chapter is Abimelech. And chapter 9, I have a feeling, might take us more than one lesson. It's 57 verses long. So I might have to break that into 2 studies. I'll see how quickly, how many different points there are in it. But here we are at the end of Gideon's life, and again, they go back to worshiping immediately. And they're not kind to Gideon's family. All those 70 sons, including, and that concubine son Abimelech. Well, Abimelech, he's a bad seed. Let's just say that. He is not a judge. He is not a God-chosen judge. We'll just say that right out. He is not a God-chosen judge. But we are going to have to leave Abimelech alone. I invite you to read chapter 9 and read about Abimelech ahead of time. Or just, you know what? Read up until chapters 1 through 8. Read a chapter a day, kind of catch up, remind yourselves of what we've done in the earlier part. I know we've also studied 17 through 21 already. We're just between 8 and 16 is what we've got left. We're about 2/3 done and 1/3 to go in the book of Judges. I'll see you next time. God bless you and be with you. Amen.